my name is Colleen Amundsen, and Shannon Bachman and myself will be talking about how and why fluid moves within the different compartments in the body. First, let's review the concept of osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of water across a semi-permeable membrane from an area of high water concentration to an area of low water concentration. Water is constantly moving from compartment to compartment in an effort to maintain homeostasis without using any kind of active transport. Starling's law is used to describe where and why fluid moves within the different compartments within the body. So, as a review, this is Starling's law. JV stands for transcapillary filtration, or the movement of water out of the capillary. More simply put, where will the water be going based on both pressure and oncotic gradient. KF is the ultrafiltration coefficient, which is the surface area plus permeability of the capillary. For example, some capillary beds within the body are very permeable to fluid flow, and some are very impermeable to fluid flow. But for all intents and purposes, this is a constant, and it's based on where in the body we're looking at, and it's something that we cannot change. The left side of the equation deals with pressure in the microvasculature versus the pressure in the tissues. This will determine whether the water will move from within the vasculature to the tissue or vice versa. The R portion of this equation is the reflection coefficient. This can be 0 or 1, 0 being very permeable and 1 being impermeable. The right side of the equation deals with colloid oncotic pressure, or the amount of solutes in either the vasculature or the tissues. An important concept to remember with colloid oncotic pressure is that it is the pressure required to prevent the movement of water across a membrane. It can also be known as your osmotic load or the number of solutes. Now we'll show you why you might care about the movement of water between the different compartments. First example, for the pressure side of the equation, this concept is referring to hydrostatic pressure, or the amount of force created by the water pushing on the walls of either the microvasculature or the pressure that the water is exerting on the tissues pushing back against the vessels.
So depending on what your blood pressure is or what's going on in your tissue, you can have a lot of force from your microvasculature pushing upon the tissue here. That force will encourage water to move from an area of a higher concentration to an area of lower concentration, or an area of higher pressure to an area of lower pressure. That's when you would see high blood pressures resulting in some type of fluid buildup in your tissues.
So let's use the real-life example of edema. Edema will occur when you have increased pressure in your PMV, or your vessel. This extra force causes the fluid to move from within the vessel to the tissue, as shown here.
Some things that may cause this, for example, is while you're at work, if you've ever noticed that at the end of a long day, you've been standing for a while, you have swelling in your feet. Just from gravity alone, your blood and your fluid will build up in your microvasculature in your feet and push out on that tissue, because the tissue from the microvasculature is greater pushing down on the tissue than what the tissue is exerting back onto the vessel. That will result in all of this fluid moving out and collecting out here and giving you a swelling type picture. How you would counteract that is if you would go home and put your feet up. Elevating your feet will have the pressure in your tissue be greater than the pressure in your microvasculature, again because blood will flow out, decrease your PMV here, tissue will be greater, and that will encourage the movement of fluid back into the vessel.
The R portion of the equation, again, represents the membrane that is either very permeable, or 0, or not permeable, or 1. An example of this is ARDS. During this acute process, the membranes between compartments become very permeable to solutes and water. Therefore, the concentration becomes the same between both the vessels and the tissues. This pretty much negates the colloid-oncotic pressure portion of that equation in this situation.
What we mean by that is, if you have a membrane that is so permeable to solutes that it cannot prevent the movement of them, it doesn't matter what the volume is in your microvasculature of solutes versus your tissue, because they will eventually equal each other out, thus making this portion of the equation inconsequential to us, and we would just be looking at the pressure between the two at that point.
So moving to the right side of the equation, this again deals with colloid-oncotic pressure, and this is easier understood by visual example.
So the first visual that I thought helped me when determining why I care about solutes and where they are and how they affect the movement of water is similar to what I just drew before. Let's just pretend that this is and you've all seen this picture probably in Dr. Haas's lecture and throughout your earlier education. Well, let's say we have a semi-permeable membrane here. Water is able to move back and forth across this membrane just due to the laws of osmosis. Solutes, however, require either large channels to be able to get through them or some type of active or passive transport, but it's not just as easy of a process as it is for water. You can think of the movement of water in two ways. It moves either from an area of high water concentration to an area of low water concentration, or it'll want to create a homeostasis between an area of high solute concentration to an area of low solute concentration. This semi-permeable membrane is preventing the solutes from equaling each other out. You'll have a little bit of water on this side and a lot of water on this side. Just based on solute concentration alone, the water is going to want to move from an area of low solute concentration or high water volume to an area of high solute concentration or low water volume. And that will eventually, the goal is to create an equilibrium here, resulting in some type of evening out of the solute load, the solute and water proportions. Maybe not the most clear, but hopefully verbally it makes a little bit more sense. So that's where you get kind of your expanded space with your solutes and your water. The next example that we wanted to discuss, similar to that, along the same wavelength, that might make it a little easier for you to understand, is if you've ever given albumin before and what the purpose of administering albumin intravascularly, what that will do for you. Albumin is, for lack of better phrasing, a dense volume that you can give into your microvasculature. We'll say that it has proteins in it, just for the purposes of this conversation. When you give albumin intravascularly, it's going to create a dense osmotic load in here. So your microvasculature, your COP-MV will go up. This will do two things based on the high solute concentration here. It'll have water do two things. The first one is it will have water stay within its concentration gradient over here, so it'll keep water and plasma inside the microvasculature just based on the laws of osmosis and diffusion. It won't encourage, it has a higher solute concentration, so greater than the tissue, so then also result in the movement of fluid into the microvasculature to try to create an equilibrium between the two compartments.